Welcome to the Westport Library. Today's program will begin momentarily. Supported by Verso Studios, created locally and shared with the world.
Good evening, everyone. If you can have a seat, I'm so glad to see everyone networking, and we look forward to having more time to network at the end of the event. Thank you. Cliff, do you want to see if should we ask Dave and Peter if they can help? Yeah. Everyone over by the bar, do you mind taking a seat, Noah? Not to call anyone out. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you all for being here tonight. Before we dive into a truly incredible program, I just want to take a minute to ground the group of individuals that we sit alongside and what truly unites us all tonight. And not just tonight, but every day. For those of you who don't know, Westport is home to about 27,000 residents, according to my Google search this morning, spread across just over 33 square miles, which is a very small amount of space. And while it may seem small on a map, Westport truly delivers big. From beauty of Campo Beach to the Westport Playhouse to our amazing partners at the Westport Library, Westport is a special place and it's undeniable. But what sets us apart is a thriving tech and business ecosystem, which serves as the beating heart of our community. In 2022, Startup Westport was founded on the belief that big things were happening here, and that with the right support, collaboration, and energy, we can make something extraordinary happen. Tonight, you'll hear a bit more about that journey from Cliff Serlin, co-founder and president of Startup Westport, who will share our story of growth and momentum, and then we'll transition into an exciting evening of programming centered on innovation in sports. Following that, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A session, so I encourage everyone to come up and ask questions and engage. This is a time for us all to come together and conclude the evening with more networking, which we see that there's conversations to be continued, and conclude the evening. Thank you all.
Thanks, Kara. Well, I think you learned your first lesson, which is getting people away from the bar is always the biggest challenge of the evening. So, well done. All right, well, thank you, Kara, for that wonderful introduction and all that you do for Startup Westport. Tonight would not be possible without Kara's efforts, so thank you. As Kara mentioned, my name is Cliff Serlin. I'm the president of Startup Westport. On behalf of the Startup Westport board, we welcome everybody here tonight. We're excited that you decided to join us for what will be a fascinating discussion about the innovation in sports. But before we jump into tonight's programming, I want to speak a little bit more about Startup Westport and our remarkable journey. Not long ago, a very small group of us assembled at First Select Woman Jen Tooker's office to chart a path that would lead to the creation of Startup Westport. As we all know, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Well, tonight I am proud to announce that we have just celebrated our second anniversary. Startup Westport has not only taken those first steps on our journey, but we are well on our way. With more than 2,000 members, we're making real progress towards building the recognition for Westport as a vibrant hub for innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. This is just the, oh, thank you. This is just the beginning, and our membership is continuing to grow. As Kara mentioned, Westport is no ordinary town. We might be small, but we punch way above our weight class. This community is home to thought leaders, innovators, and trailblazers from all walks of life who have chosen to call Westport home. And Startup Westport exists to give them a platform. We're here to spotlight their stories, share their wisdom, and spark the kind of conversations and connections that push us all forward. As I mentioned, we're just 2 years in, but our momentum is undeniable. Tonight is proof of our ability to create meaningful, high-impact events that bring this ecosystem together. It's amazing to see the networking that was happening and continues to happen. In the past year, we've launched an incredible mentorship program led by Susan and Noah Fenn that now includes over 250 participants. From what I'm told, we have the largest mentorship program in the state. We've also launched 5 thriving special interest groups in the last 9 months. Our special interest groups cover artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, digital marketing, women of Startup Westport, and investing. With over 350 SIG members and growing, these groups are where deep expertise meets real community. So I would encourage each one of you to look at our SIG offerings, and if interested, please reach out to Cal Amin, who leads our SIG efforts. So, in the past, I've spoken about the promise of Startup Westport, our vision to build something meaningful here. That promise still drives us, but tonight, I'm incredibly proud to shift the spotlight from potential to the actual success stories. Because our growth isn't just about numbers, it's about people. Behind every milestone are founders, innovators, and companies within our community who are already achieving remarkable success. And tonight, we get to celebrate them. Recently, Manifest Cyber, a Westport-based company and one of our very generous sponsors, closed a $15 million Series A funding round, a major milestone in their journey. Congratulations to Mark Frankel and his team on their tremendous accomplishment. But Mark isn't just building a category-defining company. He's also giving back to the community. He leads our cybersecurity special interest group, and we're so proud to have leaders like him. On the topic of best-in-class leadership, I'm thrilled to announce that Dave Altman is joining our senior team. Dave is our celebrity bartender, and Dave is gonna be heading up development. So Dave will be focusing on driving growth and building our sponsorship network. So potential sponsors, expect a call from Dave at some point in the near future. Additionally, connections are being made within our ecosystem that are leading to tangible results. Partnerships are being formed, angel checks are being written by Startup Westport members to help launch new businesses and ideas and initiatives. Our ecosystem continues to grow and get stronger. We have 2 very exciting announcements tonight. First, we are going to officially kick off our first pitch competition next week. This initiative is led by Peter Propp and Shabana Mani and will be open to all Connecticut companies that are in the process of launching. We will award a non-dilutive 5-digit prize to the winner of the competition that will culminate in November here at the Westport Library with a Shark Tank-like competition pitch night. So anybody who's out there who's launching a business, please get ready to submit your application. Next, it was exactly 1 year ago tonight that we celebrated Jimmy Pitaro and ESPN as our Innovator of the Year. Jimmy is actually here tonight somewhere with his wife, Jeannie. Jimmy, thank you for all, back there. Jimmy, thank you so much for all of your support. So greatly appreciated. Thank you for being here as well. For this year, I am pleased to announce that we will be honoring Mark Shapiro, the president of Endeavor, with a 2025 Startup Westport Innovator of the Year award. Mark has redefined what it means to lead at the intersection of sports, media, and entertainment. constantly pushing boundaries and creating new opportunities. His bold, forward-thinking approach perfectly embodies the spirit of innovation that we strive to foster here in Westport. So please mark your calendars for Tuesday, September 30th, where we will honor Mark formally at a special award ceremony and a fireside chat. He'll be here in person to share his insights on his extraordinary journey. Before we jump into tonight's main event, I'd like to thank our sponsors for all of their support. From the Westport Library, to HSS, to Myriad 360, Wigan & Dana, Manifest Cyber, Serendipity Labs, Alina's Cookies, there are a bunch of great cookies over there, so please grab them, and so many others. We couldn't do what we do without your support, so thank you. All right, now let's dive into the future of sports innovation, where media, technology, and community intersect like never before. To guide this conversation, we're thrilled to welcome our moderator, Andrew Marchand, one of the most respected voices in sports media today. As an award-winning senior columnist for The Athletic, Andrew has broken some of the biggest stories in business and brings sharp insights into the evolving landscape of sports broadcasting and content. Joining him on stage are two incredible leaders who represent the intersection of athletic excellence, community, and innovation. Rick Cordella, the president of NBC Sports, and Rob Simmelkjaer, CEO of the New York Roadrunners Club. In a moment, I'll turn the podium over to Andrew to introduce Rick and Rob and let them share their stories in their own words. But before I do that, I wanted to mention something a bit more personal about each of these panelists. Andrew played soccer for Staples under Dan Woog. And said that his parents told me earlier, his parents wanted to move to Weston, but he wouldn't allow them to move to Weston because he wanted to play soccer with all of his buddies here at Staples. So that's commitment to Westport. Rick played basketball for Providence College and was on a team that advanced to the Elite Eight in the NCAA tournament. And Rob, this weekend, ran the Minuteman race in a time, the 5K, in a time of 20 minutes. I think he came in 12th place, and he averaged 6 minutes and 30-second miles. And Rob convinced me that he's actually 53 years old. I don't know if I believe it, so I think I'm gonna check his ID on the way up, but it's pretty damn impressive. You're running 6:30s at 53. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists.
Before we get started, I just want to recognize Cliff and Kara, because without them, all of us wouldn't be here, and they do such a great job preparing all of us and getting us up to speed, and also, of course, getting the word out. So if everyone can just give them some applause, because it's an honor to be here. Cliff mentioned that I played soccer in 1992. If you go into Staples, the gymnasium, you look at the pictures, you'll see somebody with a lot more hair than I have now. But here we are, and so honored to be on the stage with you two. Let's just get right into it, into innovation. I'll start with you, Rick. NBC is one of the great legacy networks in our country, and now you've added Peacock, which is a streaming service that has a lot of big events like soccer and soon the NBA. When you look at innovating and you have a traditional media outlet and you're trying to be modern in the digital age, how do you go about that?
I mean, first, it starts the culture, right? You want to have people in your org feel comfortable about taking risks overall, not fear of failure. I think maybe the one most recent example is the Paris Olympics for us. We came out of 2 Olympics that were plagued by COVID, 3 in the Far East with a tough time zone. We historically held back our content for prime time and try to sort of, aggregate the ratings as best we can from 8 to 11. And I remember talking to Molly Solomon, who's our executive producer, and she's like, we got to try things differently. We had basically failed in Tokyo. Again, we could blame COVID and whatnot, but for a large part it was, hey, I'm gonna hire Snoop Dogg. And in Snoop Dogg and the Mary Carrillo role, you kind of say, really, is that gonna work? And certainly it wouldn't have been something that we would have done 10, 12 years prior. And hit a home run with it, you know, doing the Gold Zone, who, by the way, Gold Zone commentator right here back in the day, but, you know, investing a bit more money and hiring a Scott Hansen to sort of be the lead of it, and taking these bite-sized pieces and putting together and creating a red zone for the Olympics, it kind of worked. And then saying, you know what, we're going to treat 3 to 6 p.m., which is prime time in Paris. We call it Paris Prime back in the States on the East Coast. And we're going to basically show the best stuff. Simone Biles winning gold medals, and track and field, and men's basketball, and all of that. And we're not going to care that the ratings may be lower in prime time, which is a big sea change for NBC. And we did that as well. And then combined, we had this sort of almost unanimous that we were successful. And it took all that risk-taking to get there, and we were surprised at anyone else that Martha Stewart and Snoop and the Olympics all were a good sort of match, but I think that's just one example of just trying things differently.
And how does the meeting go with Snoop Dogg? You call him up and you say, hey, Snoop, we want you on the Olympics?
Well, it's funny, the story happened is that he had actually worked on a smaller show with Kevin Hart back in Tokyo, and he had that viral horse dancing clip, I think you probably remember. Yep. And whatever reason, that show didn't work. Him and Kevin, I'm not sure what happened, but he became kind of a free agent and wanted to work in the Olympics, and like, how do you work him in? And it sort of gave him a bigger role.
Now, Rob, you've worked on the Olympics. You've had a fascinating career. I mean, there's a lot of people who are executives, and then there are broadcasters. Not many who are executives and broadcasters. Just first off, just tell us how that route happened for you and how you went about that.
Well, it happened a little by accident. Actually, Cliff was mentioning a guy by the name of Mark Shapiro, who's going to be honored later this fall. And Mark was my boss at ESPN back in the day. And Mark and I started talking about my interest in trying to do some on-air stuff. He really encouraged me to give it a try, and I ended up starting to do that at ESPN, but kept my executive role, and that transitioned to NBC, where I worked with Rick for 8 years and doing some of both. So it wasn't really a plan. And I guess there's a lesson in innovation there, because sometimes the plan's not what actually gets the innovation, right? You can sometimes just stumble into interesting situations and unique opportunities, and that's what happened with me. By the way, I want to give Rick a little love here, because Rick and I were colleagues for 8 years at NBC Sports, and I have to say, I think that one of the best things NBC Universal has done in the last 2 decades was make Rick president of NBC Sports, because he is a tremendous executive, a great leader, an innovative guy, and a great human. So I was very happy to see that. Yeah.
It's very nice. I think when you had the Olympics and you guys weren't putting the stuff on digital, I think I might have suggested to do that. So
to take credit for that?
Yes, yes, I'd like to take credit for that.
The other, be innovative and listen to Andrew is sort of the lessons here.
So Rob, New York City Marathon, also something that is one of the historic events in New York and around the world. I think probably the top marathon in the world. Is that right? I mean, I guess you're going to agree with that.
We go back and forth with London.
Okay.
We had the world record as of last November. London just on Sunday broke our record by a couple hundred runners. So we're back after it now to beat London's world record.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
But when kind of like NBC in a sense, it's a traditional event in modern times, and obviously there's a lot of people who run, and COVID, even more people started running. How do you keep the New York City Marathon modern and modernize it?
So I was thinking about innovation in relation to something like a marathon, right? The distance of the marathon has been 26.2 miles roughly since the time of the ancient Greeks. So there hasn't been a ton of innovation on that front, but what happened in New York is a fascinating story. I mean, first of all, Fred Lebow, the guy who really founded New York Roadrunners and especially the modern New York City Marathon, you know, going back to 1976, he had what people thought was an insane idea to run a marathon through the 5 boroughs of New York City. The marathon had been run laps of Central Park for a few years before that, which if you've run Central Park, you know is a very difficult, very hilly course. But he had the idea to go to the mayor of New York City at the time and say, what if we ran this thing from Staten Island through all 5 boroughs and finished in Central Park? And people thought he was crazy. He was laughed out of several rooms, along with the others, with that idea. And kept at it, had perseverance, and managed to create this thing that really has become the single best day of the year in New York City. So that's a tremendous story going back a ways of innovation. To bring it more modern, Andrew, the marathon's been canceled twice in that time. 2012 because of Hurricane or Superstorm Sandy, and then of course 2020 because of COVID. And this was before I was there, but the organization really in 2020 was at a kind of an existential tipping point. The marathon funds about 70% of New York Roadrunners' budget throughout the year. We have 40 races a year, we have community programs in all 5 boroughs, but the marathon is what drives most of the revenue, and it was gone for a year. And so the organization had to get very smart about what to do, and some innovation by necessity really came from that. They created a virtual marathon, partnering with a company called Strava, which is a tech company out of California that is really kind of the social media network for active people, and created a virtual marathon. And tens of thousands of people ran that virtual marathon in 2020, and that has continued to be a pretty significant part of New York Roadrunners business. Now we offer that virtual marathon every year, and we have thousands and thousands of people running it anywhere around the world, wherever they want to run. So, sometimes, and I think this is true in the case of media these days as well, it is the threat that causes the innovation, right? And that's what happened with us.
Now, the 2 guys who invented Strava also invented The Athletic, so I guess we can give them both credit for part of where we are now. Have you run a marathon?
Yes, I've run New York twice, and then I've run Tokyo about 6 weeks ago, and I ran Berlin last September. So yes,
4.
I've run 4 in my life.
How about you?
I run 4.
You've run 4 marathons?
2 New York, 2 Boston.
Wow.
I'm over Clydesdale division than Rob is here, so
That's impressive.
I'm just
Who
trying
has the
to
better
get...
time? Who has the better time?
Oh,
What was your best
trust
time?
me, the sun's setting by the time I'm crossing the finish line.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
My wife's run 6. Okay, so she's got you guys beat, but I got 0. Although I would have. We got pregnant. My wife got pregnant. We were going to run, and I think I was doing 19 miles, but didn't ever make it. So when you look forward in terms of innovation, Rob, there's a lot of apps, a lot of things that where running is. You mentioned Strava. How does that? How do you incorporate that? Because what you guys do, and maybe you can explain this too to people. It's not just the New York City Marathon. There's a lot of races during the year. It's a lot more than New York City Marathon. Yeah, that's right. And when I came to Roadrunners 2.5 years ago, one of the first things I discovered is that we had an app for the marathon. And the main purpose of that app was to track your friends and family running the marathon. People really want to, see where their friends are, if they're out on the course, to watch them. So we had that single app, and then when the marathon was over, that app would go away. It was gone. We'd have another single app for the second biggest event we have, the United Airlines NYC Half. That would come up and it would go away. When I first learned this, I was like, wait a second, how many downloads are you guys getting for these apps? And the marathon was getting close to 200,000 downloads. The half was getting 80,000 downloads. And then they would just delete the app. There was nothing to do afterwards, which to me was bananas. So just this past March, after a couple of years working on it, we developed a single New York Roadrunners app. For the first time all year, people can track runners in any of our 40 races. I can track somebody like Rick, and we'll get an alert whenever Rick is going to run a race, right? So I'll say, oh, Rick Cordella's running the Run Is One 4-mile race this week. I'll get an alert that he's running. I can send him a message, wishing him luck, congratulating him. So, it's a little thing like that. Now those downloads we're getting for all those big events, we're keeping them. And that's becoming part of a user base that we can engage with over the year, right? So it's little things like that that start to really move us forward as a nonprofit organization that is still catching up in a lot of ways when it comes to technology. Now, Rick, we talked about the tradition of NBC, and then now you've created Peacock. You were very instrumental in terms of Peacock. Before you got the NBC Sports president's job, you're overseeing Peacock. When you look at the transition that we're seeing, and we have people of all ages here, our generation, at least mine, I think I might be a little older than you, slightly, we grew up in cable TV, and now cable is, people still have it, but streaming has really come to the forefront with, what the traditional players are doing, but also Netflix, Amazon, YouTube. How do you look at the streaming world and the innovation that you need to do and what others are doing?
I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I mean, at NBC, we think, and that's part of it, how our spin co is happening, where we're spinning off our cable assets, but we believe that broadcast and streaming together will yield the highest reach in media. And we see that with Sunday Night Football, where Sunday Night Football is the highest since 2015. But a reason why we were setting that 10-year plus record was because the Peacock had 10% or over 2 million viewers each and every Sunday night. So I know that there is exclusive streaming on Peacock, but at the end of the day, the biggest events, the Olympics, the Sunday Night Football, and the NBA next season, will be simulcast on Peacock. So combine those two. And what Peacock enables you to do is have better bells and whistles, more targeting and advertising. It has a lot of things that you can do that you can't do on linear TV. So over time, as people shift, and we'll continue to see that sort of growth on Peacock, we think it's going to be a better experience. You'll have scores, you'll have stats and data. We can be able to customize things for you. We had the Al Michaels AI machine during the Olympics giving you customized highlights based upon your preferences. I mean, those are things that can't happen through the traditional cable box or through the traditional sort of antenna on your box. So I think over time, it's going to be a great thing for sports fans in particular, as you sort of had different camera angles and everything else, and you can kind of customize your experience. So we're not getting rid of legacy. And it's still 90% of our economics, but we're certainly investing in the Peacock side.
I do want to get into AI in a little bit, but so the 2 million people though, because NBC,
Yep.
you can watch for free, but people have Peacock and they just choose to go to Peacock even though they could watch it for free?
You can watch it for free. I think that they're, in all aspects of life, convenience of access you're willing to pay for, and so certainly people can buy a rabbit ears and stick it to their window and get access to traditional NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, but getting the streaming package through Peacocks, it's $7 and pretty easy.
Yeah, and what have you found in terms of when you bring people in through sports? Do they stay and watch your other shows? How is sports drive it in terms of Peacock?
I mean, look, we probably ended up with the NBA rights because of that fact that we had an NFL wildcard game that, quite frankly, we kind of lucked into. It was available. The NFL didn't really put out an RFP. We bid on it. It was a lot of money for 3 hours of content. I think you reported $105 million. I'm not going to confirm that, but you're typically on the nose. So we paid a lot of money for NFL content, and we had some expectations of new signups and how people would behave. But the key for us is that it couldn't be a pay-per-view. It couldn't be a one and done. People came in, they churned out. That would have been an economic disaster for us. And what we saw instead is that big, huge event drove in millions of new subscribers to our business. But then the show Ted, which is a Seth MacFarlane show about the teddy bear, and became a top 10 show on Nielsen because of sports. Traders became a top 10 reality show because of sports. And our entire business was elevated, not just for January, February, March, but even to this day, there were people that signed up on that day for the wildcard game and are subscribers. Our overall inactive base, you always have zombie subscribers in any service you have, went down by over 75%. So you're able to sort of do a lot of things with sports. With sports, there's passion behind it. It's exclusive, unsubstitutable content, and people react. I know you're a Premier League fan, and you have Peacock because of that. Yep. And my hope and expectation is you didn't just watch your Everton games, but you watch other content, or your family at least watch other content that is made available. So I joke around all the time that sports tends to be the milk in the back of the grocery store. You gotta walk through a whole bunch of aisles in order to get there, and hopefully, if we're doing things right, you're able to sort of, buy something or watch something else on your way out the door.
Well, Rick, he lives on the street that I grew up on, which is kind of a weird coincidence, and has one of his children is the same age as my daughter. I don't know if it's the same case for you, but I get texts from college basically, something's wrong, or what's the password for Peacock or Netflix, and that's about it.
Yeah, remote IT is certainly at the very top of the list for any college kids.
And all I'm asking for is, if I say I love you, just give me a heart. Just tell me you're okay. I'm not really asking for that much. Can you just give me that?
Exactly.
Rob, I always find when you look at it's something like innovation and you're always looking forward, I think it's always good to look back as well. And so I said, before, you've had a very unique career in terms of being an executive and a broadcaster. What shaped you in terms of into your career and how you got to where you've gotten to?
Well, I think for me, I had the opportunity to work for some really great leaders along the way. I can't overstate, if you want to work in any business or learn how to be a leader, to have mentors and work for great people, because I had the opportunity to work for 10 years at ESPN, and for a good part of that was directly reporting to a guy named George Bodenheimer, who was the president, one of Jimmy Pitaro's predecessors as president of ESPN, and he was a great leader. And so I got a chance to have a front row seat to what it means to be a great leader, and how you make decisions, how you challenge your team to take risks, to innovate, to not, lead with fear, but lead with optimism and hope. Those are the things that I learned working for George. I got a chance to actually get some exposure during that period to Bob Iger, who's, still CEO of the Walt Disney Company. I actually was thinking about this today, and I brought his book out here because his book actually is a great short read about how to innovate and how to lead. It's called The Ride of a Lifetime. Saw him with Jimmy down in Nashville, Tennessee, at a conference last week. And then, others along the way as well. I have a chance also, even here in the state of Connecticut. I'm still the chairman of the board of the Connecticut Lottery in my spare time. It's a volunteer position. And through that, I've worked pretty closely with the governor of Connecticut, Ned Lamont, who is a different kind of leader in the political sphere, but is a tremendous leader in his own right. So, having a front row seat to leaders like that is invaluable in terms of what it teaches you. And I think the lessons that a great leader can really teach when it comes to innovation is it's a skill set to get people to even have the mindset to innovate. There's like a kind of a mystical, like, oh, this great idea comes to you in the shower. That's where I get most of mine. Or, in some flash of brilliance. But sometimes it's actually more process oriented. How do you actually create a culture and a set of processes in an organization that make people feel it's okay to take risks and to try things and to have bad ideas? Because I think most ideas are bad ideas, and you got to be okay with that. And the 1 in 10 that's good has to be, given a chance to actually see the sunlight.
I do have an idea. You can tell me if it's good or bad. You said you're chairman of the lottery. Like, what kind of access do you have in terms of the number? Because we can talk after.
I get that question all the time. I'm sorry. You're just gonna have to take your chances.
Fair
Absolutely.
Enough. I figured. Rick, same question for you. In terms of, we said starred at Providence as a. Rick always puts himself down and says he played college basketball for Providence. Those old enough, it was Sham God. I don't know if you remember him. Pete Gillen was the coach who had an amazing career. So I don't know how good you were. I mean, I did look up your minutes once, but still.
My GPA was higher than my minutes.
This is still, it's a great accomplishment. I thought playing for Staples Soccer to me was like the New York Yankees, so to play Division I basketball is great. So, but in terms of getting there and then getting into this career, how did this happen for Rick?
Yeah, I was probably like every other college kid, loved sports, grew up in Boston, huge Boston sports fan through and through, lucky enough to play collegiate athletics. But when you graduate, you don't really know what you're going to do. I had a business management major, a computer science minor, and it was 1999, the dot-com boom is booming. And I'm like, I'm going to become a computer programmer. This sounds great. They're going to pay me all this money and making more money than my friends. And I started and I hated it. Like, I just absolutely knew it wasn't for me. You put your headphones on, you pound out code, and it's an HR consulting company putting, medical, dental benefits online. Before it was paper and pencil, I guess. So putting that online to a website, and I just didn't like it. And so I went back to school full time, and I was hugely into fantasy sports. I played my, 4 different fantasy baseball leagues and different fantasy football leagues, and I wrote into this small little website called rotoworld.com. And Roto-World was a player news service at that point. So-and-so sprains his ankle, here's the backup to pick up kind of thing. And I wrote in and said, I'll write for free. So I'd go to school during the day and at business school, and then at night I'd write, basically, I guess like writing like you, late at night, Keith Folk saves game for Oakland A's, like he's the closer. And eventually they started paying me like $5 an hour, and I loved it. I'm like, how many people in America are working in fantasy sports right now? This is like 2002 or 2003, somewhere in that range. And fast forward, I graduate, my girlfriend is now my wife of 20 years, and my mother get a real job, you have your MBA, and instead I went to this small little 2-person startup in Somers, New York, and said, I'll do anything for you. I don't have kids, I don't have a mortgage, I can make very little money, I just want to get in the business and work in fantasy sports. And so I went up there and I computer programmed for them. They had a couple contracts with the NHL and Major League Baseball, and we kind of built the company. And eventually in 2006, NBC, which had reacquired NFL rights, was launching Sunday Night Football, decided they wanted to reinvigorate or at least start their digital strategy, probably about 10, 15 years behind ESPN and CBS Sportsline, but invested in that, and they decided to buy us. And so through that acquisition, I came into NBC, and I think my first job was director of fantasy content. And kind of fooled enough people along the way to get to where I am today. But it's never a really straight shot of your career where it just continues to go up and to the right. It tends to be a bit more circuitous.
Yeah, maybe one day you can be a writer again if the president thing doesn't.
There we go. You can find my articles in the Wayback Machine.
I gotta look those up.
We syndicated all our articles out to Fox Sports, and I remember seeing my byline on Fox Sports. My column was called Way Outside.
All right, pretty good.
I have several fantasy baseball trophies that I owe to Roto-World, by the way, so I just want to thank you for that. It was very good information.
Probably my advice.
Absolutely.
And what year were those? Like when the Roto-World?
2002, like Matthew Berry, who's he was a coworker of mine there. So 2002 to 2004, maybe when it was like part-time-ish, and then it was full-time to 2006 when they bought us.
Is Matthew a Westport guy? I feel like he's around.
No,
here.
he's up near.
Okay,
He used to be
I think I saw him in
yeah.
Main Street once from afar. Actually, during when you're negotiating with him, I almost ran him down to try to find out what's going on.
Maybe.
And Rob, when you talked about Bob Iger and George Bodenheimer, in terms of the style that you try to have in terms of as a leader, the lessons that you got from them, what do you apply to today?
I think about both of them often in different situations, and I think from a style point of view, George was someone who let his leaders lead, right? He made sure he had a great team in place. I think when you're the CEO of an organization, the number one thing you need to do is figure out who is the team that you are going to war with, who is the group of people that's going to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And, I learned that from George and Bob and many others. That's the number one thing, is the people that you put in the key roles. I've been at Roadrunners now for 2.5 years. I think about 40% of my senior staff has turned over in that time. We wanted to innovate and do some things that the org wasn't doing, and we put some great people in place, and it's seeing amazing results. Actually, one of them's right here, Alex Egan, who's sitting in the front row, has been working with me now for about 7 or 8 months as our new Chief Development Officer. We've got a former colleague of mine in Rick's, Juliette Morris, as our new Chief Marketing Officer. Crystal Howard, a former ESPN colleague of mine, is now our Head of PR and Public Affairs. So that's the number one thing, is getting great people in place. And then once you've done that, your job should get a lot easier, because you're going to let them do what they do. And, I try very hard not to get into the weeds of any particular area. Obviously, you've got to know the details and get involved when there's a really big decision that has to be made, or certainly if there's a crisis of some kind, you've got to get more in the weeds, if you will. But for the most part, if I'm getting in the weeds of somebody's area, somebody's business, usually it's because something is not going well. Something is usually wrong if I'm really, really involved in any given part of our organization. So, once you've done that, once you've put great people in place, then it's just about creating a culture that again makes people want to take smart risks and innovate. And one of the things I did in the last year or so at New York Roadrunners is that we created an innovation platform. We call it Innovation Station. And every quarter, people are invited to submit ideas for things that they think we should do, whether it's a new type of a race or a new community program or a new reward for runners or whatever it may be, a tech innovation. And so that creates like a bottom-up stream of innovation, because a lot of innovation in a big organization or a medium one like ours comes from the top down. The CEO, the president has an idea, and some of those are great, but you want to make everybody in the organization feel like they have a chance to have their idea heard. And so that's something we've created, and it's had great impact.
How many people are in the New York Road Runners?
We have like 270.
270.
Yeah.
And in terms of what's the best idea you've gotten from there?
Well, we're actually, I don't know, my PR people aren't here. I think I can say this. I'll say a couple. I mean, first of all, we're going to announce pretty soon a race that's going to happen this summer that is just for first-time runners. So something we're calling it the First Time 5K. It's going to be, we're going to have two of them, one in Brooklyn, one in the Bronx. And it's just a chance to get people who have never really run a race. And our races can be intimidating. We have 5,000 to 50,000 runners in our races, and it's a big project to know how to do it and where to get your bib and how to train. So this is something to convince people to give it a try. That we're a nonprofit. Our mission is to create healthier lives and stronger communities through the transformative power of running. And if we don't get new people running, then we're not really doing our job. So that's one idea. And then another one I want to shout out, since actually our head of sustainability, Ali Crisculo, is here in the audience. I always have to shout out people in the audience. We had an idea, Ali and I, when I first got to Roadrunners, how can we make the TCS New York City Marathon the most sustainable, carbon neutral marathon in the world? It was a really big priority for us because we know that we have a significant carbon footprint in what we do. So Ali and her team and I, we came up with an idea and we launched it this past marathon. It's something called Team for Climate, which is a way for people to get into the marathon by raising money to help us both offset and kind of reduce our carbon emissions. And we launched this thing for the first time last year. It sold out in 7 minutes. Wow. And we raised almost $1 million in the first year to help us offset our carbon emissions. We're going to be a carbon neutral marathon within a few years if we keep at this. So it's things like that that really help us, innovate and raise our game as an organization.
That's great. Rick, same kind of question for you in terms of innovation. You don't think, what you guys do, but in terms of what's your favorite innovation? It doesn't even have to be at NBC. It could be Roto World, it could be whatever, in terms of your career that you're most proud of.
Most proud of an innovation, That wasn't on the pre-list of questions to think of.
Well, first of all, while you're answering, I got to tweet out the news about the first runners thing.
Oh, there you go. Exactly, there you go. No, I think there's you look at big innovations and things you can do that are different. One, I won't call it an innovation necessarily, but again, I talk to young people all the time. You're an expert in your space. Whatever it is that you're looking at every day, you know more about that space than the CEO or the president or whatever your division. And there was an opportunity back in 2000, I guess it was 8, where I always wondered, why can we play season-long fantasy for money, and it's, quasi-legal, and then you couldn't play, daily fantasy? And so we invented something called Snapdraft, which was an early daily fantasy game. And quite frankly, it didn't work, because it didn't have the money and didn't have whatever. Ebersol told me, don't start a sports book, but you can start this. And so we did, and then we shut it down, but we quickly partnered with FanDuel. We were one of the first investors in FanDuel before they even were, the FanDuel we know today. I think we put $10 million in the first round when they were worth $100 million. And then we sold it for $500 million down the road. So it was a pretty good outcome, but that was again, where I tell people, again, if you're smart about that area, you're gonna know it better than anyone else. But I think it's also being smart, risk-taking, but having the gumption to sort of go to your boss and I believe in this idea, I really wanna try it. Yeah. And so that's one that I'm particularly proud of. There are other instances with, streaming sports and doing things where people were saying, don't go do NBC Sports Gold in 2015. We had a whole distribution team saying that's bad for the cable ecosystem. We pushed and said we think this is where the world's going. You know, we launched with Premier League and Tour de France and a few others, and it sort of, you know, at least gave us a little bit of intelligence when we launched Peacock of what, you know, how can it work? Why does customer service look? Because we're such a B2B business ultimately in the broadcasting game, because you're handing off to cable and MVPDs. This was going to consumer. Like, what if your Manchester City or Man U feed goes down? People aren't happy. They're not calling Comcast, they're calling NBC Sports and saying, I want a refund. So that was another one that we kind of did through the years.
Now, the reason I love my job is I love to tell stories and understand people's stories, because, you know, usually there's some, especially people who are very successful, there's some tension in their career where things almost don't break the correct way, and or something does, and you rise, you know, to a certain level. So I'm going to set you up for this one, because I do believe I know the answer. You mentioned Dick Ebersol.
Yep.
And you made a pretty big decision in terms of an acquisition when you were in charge of NBCSports.com. I'm leading into getting Mike Florio now.
Oh,
wasn't that the move?
Yeah, that was, yeah.
So,
That's a good one. I mean, it gets to your point earlier about back against the wall. So 2008, NBCSports.com launches. Again, we were very late compared to everyone else. We were very much a Me Too website. I think the expectation was you promote it on Sunday Night Football in front of 20, 25 million people, and the next day you'll have 20, 25 million people showing up at your doorstep, and that just didn't happen. There are habits that had already been created to go to ESPN and CBS and others. And so there were rounds of layoff going on. I think through sheer apathy, Ebersol put me in charge of digital at that point.
I doubt that.
And so I looked around and I thought, like, hey, we're not going to all be here that much longer if we don't figure this out. And so the risk taking, I guess, was I had a higher tolerance at that point. And I had sort of read this guy, Mike Florio, for Pro Football Talk, and he's a lawyer in West Virginia, a little bit of a stir of the pot, so to speak, and he would write in the morning, he'd be a lawyer during the day, and he'd write in the evenings, and back in the day, he kind of owned the Michael Vick dogfighting case as being a lawyer and a lot of legal issues around that. And so he would write about things that we weren't comfortable, like Jerry Jones potentially getting a Dewey arrest. Like, that's not typically something you find on NBCSports.com. But I went to Dick Ebersol and I said, I think we should try and hire this guy. And I had known him because he sold Roto-World draft guides for me back in like 2003. So a little bit of relationship is a big part of all of our success in business too. And I flew down to West Virginia, about an hour south of Morgantown, so really the middle of nowhere, on this like Pete Dye golf course, so, you know, in a random cabin, and we hammered out a deal where he still owns the brand, and we brought him in, and it was a little bit of a shock because, you know, here's a guy that's, you know, out there, snarky, not really the NBC Sports brand, and then Dick, to his credit, you know, said, I'm going to give him editorial control. You can write about what you want about. I'm not going to get in your hair. And the very, very first story, like, or first week he was there, he wrote about the Ben Roethlisberger civil case that happened at our Tahoe golf event. So double whammy, big star, NFL star, happening at our golf event in Tahoe. And a bunch of executives were like, we got to take that story down. We can't be the ones breaking it. It's going to, you know, American Century's going to be really upset by it, who's a sponsor. Ben Roethlisberger, we need him to do interviews in the fall. This is not worth it. And to give Dick credit, he said, I gave him my word that he would have editorial control and he can write the story. And it became our highest traffic story we've ever had in NBC Sports history. And that kind of led to, you know, a little more trust in me in hiring and giving us more budget.
Yeah, everyone here might not know this, but the NFL, they're very easy to work with. They'll let you write and say whatever you want. They're not, you know, they're billions and billion dollar company, and they're very simple to be around. So I'm sure that was easy for you guys. If that you did take a risk, and obviously you worked out.
He became on air. He's still on air. I mean, he's still our news and information guy on Sunday Night Football, and he still stirs the pot.
Up,
and
some of that stuff you say, oh God, I think you're getting a call.
Yeah, I might get a call for this. I don't know.
We'll edit it out of the stream. I don't think it's not live.
That's good. That's good.
It's plausibly live, I believe.
I'll be in the Athletic tomorrow.
There you go. Rob, you know, I talked about that friction point for Rick. In terms of your career, is there something that where, you know, you had to figure out, you know, you could have gone different directions, and obviously you ended up where you did, which is amazing. Is there a time where you had a certain decision that you maybe had to make to go forward, where things were? I think that personally, especially for young people, I think that happens almost in everyone's career, where there's some time where you kind of have to, the water's really choppy and you kind of have to get through it. You know, very few people don't have that at some point. How about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had a few. I think Rick's early experience with that HR company is my early experience as a lawyer, because I have a law degree. I practiced law for a few years and quickly realized that writing briefs and doing document review was not for me. And so I was able to, again, just like Rick said, through some relationships I had, being an intern at CBS Sports and ABC News when I was in college, a guy who I'd worked with as an intern had gone on to be an executive at ESPN, and he opened up an opportunity for me, and that was not the easiest conversation with my parents, with the law degree and fancy office and big law firm, New York City, to say I'm going to leave all that and go work in Bristol, Connecticut at ESPN, but I knew that would make me a lot happier. So, I made that move, and then a year into that, I was in charge of the NBA on ESPN. That was my job, and I'm scheduling.
Year in?
Yeah, a year in. When I showed up at ESPN, they were just acquiring the rights for the first time. They didn't have anybody there to be like the director of programming in charge of the NBA, and so Mark Shapiro, previously mentioned, gave me that opportunity, and next thing you know, kind of like Rick was saying with writing fantasy posts, I'm like, a pig in slop. I can't believe that my job is to sit there and make the schedule for ESPN NBA games, and it was incredible. So that was clearly a pivot point. I think later on, I had to make some choices along the way about whether I was going to focus on just being on the air or being an executive. I had opportunities to just be on the air and do nothing but that. And for some reason, just didn't feel like that was going to take full advantage of everything that I could do and wanted to do. And I, felt like there was a little bit of a loss of control there, being talent, as they call it in the media industry. I wanted to be more than just quote unquote talent. And so I made that decision along the way to kind of try to keep a foot in both those paths, and, have been able to do it. So, it's not usually obvious at the moment, when you're making these decisions. Sometimes it is when you're really miserable and you've got to make a move, but usually, it's challenging to make those decisions. You just do the best you can with the information you have.
Now, we have a few more minutes, and we're going to open it up to questions. So if you have a question, start formulating it, and we're going to move to that in a minute. I want to ask you about AI, because you're talking about the future. I think we are in a nexus of another renaissance in our society. We're already seeing it. And I'll start with you, Rob, first, and then same question for Rick. How do you see AI in terms of what you do, and even just in society? How do you look at AI?
I think it's mostly positive in terms of what it makes possible. We're, again, like you think of something like New York Roadrunners, and what role could AI possibly have in people running? People have been running since they've been walking, right? So like, what does AI have to do with that? But we now have a partnership with a company called Runna, which helps create virtual training plans for people who want to run marathons or half marathons or whatever, and they're using AI to help figure out your best training plan. So if I say I want to run a half marathon in 1 hour and 30 minutes, and it has some information about my running history, right? It can take all that and say, all right, well, here's what you need to do. And it gives you a plan every week of exactly what to do, how far to run, how fast to run. It's like a coach, right? And so it's using AI as you go through that training program to figure out how to adjust and things like that. And I think there's no limit to the use cases. We're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can do, and it's a huge priority of mine to figure out how we can do more to just improve people's experiences and what they're getting out of running. And so that, to me, it's mostly positive.
Rick, what do you think?
I mean, AI is just a big topic. It runs everything from, for us, we can carve up Olympic highlights using AI, so someone's not in an edit bay cutting up the field hockey highlights or whatnot. We can use it for S&P to sort of bleed out expletives that are overheard during our telecast instead of having someone on a second delay and having to hear it. So there are good features like that. I mean, the Al Michaels AI thing was fascinating because it was him. I mean, it was really like, good morning, Andrew. Here are your Olympic highlights based upon what you like. And then he would narrate the whole thing. And we just cut him a check and said, we're going to use your voice. He didn't sit down, do audio boards or anything like that. And so you kind of wonder, like, that's cool to a degree, but where does it go from there, right? Can you all of a sudden now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now, probably long since Al left this earth, is he calling Amazon Thursday night football games? Yeah. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I mean, you get into sort of the ethics of it all. What are the jobs that are now maybe not needed in society because AI can take over? Is there the robots taking over? I don't know. So look, at the end of the day, I think this stuff will be debated in a million different ways. It'll be legislated through SAG-AFTRA and other things like that. But it's a big change to all of our businesses, and how we react to it, how we deal with it will be interesting.
And I might get a phone call for this, but I was once told that Bob Costas and Al Michaels used to have a little competition who could get paid more and work less. It sounds to me that Al might have won that one with the AI.
He may have won that, and that's not surprising to hear that. Basketball, was that one who got paid more?
There's a fight over that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll cut that from the live stream because I honestly think I might get a phone call on that one. I won't say from which one of those two gentlemen. Then when you look at AI, do you look at it as additive, though? There's people
we're going to experiment. We're going to, absolutely, as a company, we're going to experiment. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do more efficiently and better because of AI that just humans can't do. And I think, automation through our history of America, I mean, that's a positive thing, right? I mean, they were nervous about factory workers being laid off because the robots can, in auto factories or whatever else, make cars more efficient. And it happened. And obviously, we found other jobs and whatnot. I mean, this is a little just the sort of the process of innovation. But, when you get into creative arts, how does that matter? How does that change? What do you want to protect? And I think those are the things we need to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it seems as if anybody who's used it, I'm sure most of us have, at least tried it out, it does make things much simpler. And I'm sure there's a lot of efficiencies in terms of saving money. I mean, have you found that already, Rob? Or is it something you think that you will eventually? How do you look at that?
We haven't yet, to be honest. I really think that, as an organization that lives mostly in the physical world, right, we're still kind of just nibbling around the edges of what that can look like. But, we've got 85,000 members of New York Roadrunners right now, and so they have lots of questions and needs, and when a race is coming up, there's a lot of inbound questions. So the ability to answer people's questions and through natural language conversation, with an AI chatbot or whatever, there's definitely some potential for us there to improve the runner's experience and probably do it more efficiently.
Now, you've run 4, and you've run 4?
4.
How many more are you guys going to do?
I think it's time for a face-off. What do you say?
There we go, yeah.
How many more marathons do you have in you?
I don't know. I'd like to do one when I'm 50, but we'll see.
I mean, Rick has 5 kids, so I don't know.
Well, getting out of the house is a positive in that regard, so it may not be the negative you think it is.
How about you, Rob? You going to run another one?
I don't know. I'm halfway to the Abbott World Marathon Majors 6-star medal. For those who know what that is, there's 6 major marathons in the world. Okay. And if you run all 6, you get a special 6-star kind of medal. So I've run half of them. So I don't know, maybe Chicago this fall. I run New York, Tokyo, and Berlin. Okay. And then the other 3 are London, Boston, which is hard, because you got to qualify to get into that on a time.
Unless you know people.
Unless you know someone, it's true. I probably could get in, but I want to do it the hard way. I want to run the qualifying time and Chicago. So I'm thinking about Chicago this fall. We'll see how my knees feel about that.
Okay. All right. Well, good luck with that. I'm still at 0. I'm planning on staying at 0. But the rest of my family, they run.
You're not helping our business, Andrew.
No. My niece and nephew, though, do you have this is actually a great program if anybody's in the city, is that you can run 10 races and you volunteer at 1.
It's called 9+1. So if you run 9 races in a calendar year and volunteer at 1, you're guaranteed entry to the following year's TCS New York City Marathon. And so we have a lot of people do that, including a lot of people from Westport. I see people from Westport at the finish line all the time saying they drove down 6 in the morning to get to the start of the race to do their 9+1. So it's an early wake-up call from out here, but you can do it.
And now if I looked at your guys' careers, if you look 5, 10 years, down the road? What are you hoping when you talk about innovation? Like what do you, it doesn't even have to be personal, but in terms of where your companies are going, or just personally, where do you see things, and what are you hoping to accomplish as you go forward?
I mean, from an industry standpoint, media is as foggy as it's ever been. I mean, again, I've been at NBC Sports now for 18 plus years, and it felt for a long time it was a rinse, lather, repeat, and now it feels like every 3 months you're like, where's the world going? How are we going to get there? So it's hard to predict where that's going to go. I do think that broadcast TV is having a renaissance to a certain degree. You look at all the various ratings records, and not just NBC. I mean, we're proud of the Paris Olympics and Sunday Night Football, but Fox had the highest Super Bowl of all time. CBS just came off the Masters and March Madness, and two high watermarks they had. ESPN and Turner having a great first round of the NBA playoffs, highest in 25 years. And so it feels like, I shouldn't even say sports, but live TV on broadcast. Thanksgiving Day Parade on NBC was the highest of all time last year. Despite all the streaming, despite Netflix and Amazon and Apple and everyone else coming to be, the old, legacy broadcaster is still the best place to reach the mass audience. And so my hope and expectation is that continues for some period of time. I'm not naive enough to think that 5, 10, 15 years down the line, there's not some equivalency, but I don't know. We'll see. So that's maybe a hope and an expectation.
How about you, Rob?
So I mentioned that we have 85,000 members of New York Roadrunners, and I really believe if we do our job and create abilities for people to run with us or experience the incredible benefits of running, not just in our races, but anywhere in the world, we should have 250,000 members of New York Roadrunners. I think the biggest limiting factor for us right now is that people are members primarily to get into the races. And all of our races are sold out. Just about every single race that we've put on since I've been CEO now for 2.5 years has sold out, sometimes within minutes. And it's simply because so many people are running since the pandemic. Running it was the only thing you could do for a lot of the pandemic, and so many people have stayed with it for the physical benefits, the mental health benefits of running. And so we've got this overwhelming demand. And the challenge I have is to how to fulfill that demand. How do we give people the opportunity to experience running and running with us without getting into one of our races? And that's where innovation and technology can really, play a part. That's why, this app, which is kind of version 1.0 right now, I think by the time it gets to where it should be, 5.0, can be something that really revolutionizes the organization and hopefully will be the best app for running out there.
Before we open it to questions, I have a final one that I'd love to ask. And I'll start with you, Rob. The morning of the New York City Marathon, I can't imagine, that has to be nerve-wracking. Like, what is that day like for you?
Yeah, it's a long day. I stay in the city the night before. I have a police escort that picks me up at about 4 a.m.
Wait, hold on one second. You can't just say police escort without telling us what that is. Not all of us, I'm just a reporter.
I have
how does that work?
A couple of New York's finest come and pick me up, and they get me
in Westport?
No, from the city. I stay in the city.
Oh, you said the city.
I stay in the city that night, so they'll get me.
I would stay in Westport and get it the whole way in.
And
I do it on I tell them the New York City Marathon's on a Wednesday, and in the middle of traffic.
It's too much. It's too much. So I stay in the city all that week. And they'll get me to Staten Island by about 4:30 in the morning. I start doing media interviews from Staten Island before the sun comes up at about 5:15. Local media, national media. We have our broadcast that kicks off at 7 a.m. with our partners here at ESPN and WABC in New York. We start the race around 8. I get back in the police car and kind of follow the leaders along the race course until I cut off and get to the finish line ahead of the leaders. And then I'm there to watch the winners of the race break the tape. We do awards, things like that. And then the best part of that day for me is I get to spend hours and hours at the finish line of the TCS New York City Marathon, which I know, apologies to Disney, but I think that's the happiest place on earth because people come and the range of emotions that you see when people cross that finish line. There's nothing like that in the world. And I get to sit there and give out high fives and fist bumps for hours and hours and hours. And then the end of the day for us is actually one of the things that's most unique about the New York City Marathon, which is we have something called final finishers. which is we light up the park. Our finish line is a tavern on the green.
That's me, by the way.
Yeah, you could be in this.
Yeah.
We turn the very last finishers of the marathon into a giant party. There's glow sticks and there's a DJ and there's music, and we celebrate these people who are coming in 10, 11, 12 hours of running. And we make that one of the highlights of the marathon. And usually every year, like the videos that we have that are by far the most viewed videos on social media are of one of those last people coming across the finish line. So that's how I end my day around 9 p.m. So it's a full day.
There's so much doom and gloom in society and division amongst everyone. I mean, the marathon may be the one sporting event where you can actually believe in humanity again.
Yes.
You know, it's a really just an unbelievable thing for New York City, and your team does a great job.
Thank you.
But let me ask you this, is it nerve-wracking or is it fun? Because it seems like it would be a little nerve-wracking.
It's mostly fun,
Okay.
to be honest. I mean, people ask me what makes a successful marathon, and for me, it's simply the safety of the runners, right? I mean, it's impossible in a position like mine to not think about, at least a little bit, the worst case scenarios of what can happen. We all know what happened in Boston, in 2013, and that's always on the minds of all of us. When you're putting on a mass participation event with 55,000 people running through a city that you cannot possibly secure, right? We have an incredible team of people on the medical side. We have an incredible partnership with NYPD and state and federal law enforcement. So we do everything we can possibly do to make it a safe event. And thank God, since I've been here, it's been safe for the most part. But of course, that's the thing that's always in the back of your mind is what could happen.
Well, it's an amazing event. So Rick, you have the Olympics, you have the Super Bowl, you have a lot of other big events, but those are probably the two biggest that you have. The night or the day, depending on where the time zone it is, of the Olympics or the Super Bowl, what is that? When you wake up, first off, police escort or no?
No police escort here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not as big time.
Yeah, one day. What is that day like for you? Either one.
It's different. I mean, we don't like put on the events. Like, I'm not worried about
You have to
security
be on the air,
of the
though.
state. I'm worried about
That's
my
pressure.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like the opening ceremony of Paris, like it was on lockdown, and they had the whole Seine River blocked off. And can people get to where they need to get to? Can we make sure this goes off without a hitch? The opening ceremony often can be controversial, and there was a segment that was controversial last year. How are we going to deal with that from a press standpoint? But ultimately, just like it's planning. Like again, it's like anything else in life. If you plan, you get ahead of it. You feel pretty confident. You know what's going to happen. You're going to execute the plan. And right people, right place. Believe in your team. All of that.
Great. Rob, Rick, this has been amazing. I think we're going to open it up for questions. So if you just you line up over here, we have a microphone set up, and we'll go one by one. If you can say your name and maybe just a little, if you're from Westport or something about yourself, that'd be great.
Thanks, guys. It's going to be a very brief question period, but we've got two people lined up.
And more coming.
Here they come. They're coming in.
Okay, hi guys. This has been really great. Thank you so much. My question is a little bit about the evolving landscape, and as a point of context, I've spent many years in sports, TV, cable, places like Fox, MSG, Time Warner Cable. And I'm now working to launch a new women's pro sports league for women's gymnastics. The most watched Olympic sport
There you go.
has no pro league. And my question relates to sort of the traditional linear TV ecosystem of reaching an audience at scale, measuring the tune-in, and monetizing. What seems to be happening is in these emerging leagues and women's sports leagues that the value or the monetization is happening not just with tune-in, right, but with a fan engagement. It seems as though women's sports fans don't just watch, they buy. And in the context of shift and murky media future, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on ways to optimize the monetization opportunities in the context of content distribution, and in the context of NIL and fan engagement sort of fueling new engagement models? Thank you.
Go for it.
I mean,
Look at you, Rick.
well, first of all, I'll start with gymnastics is obviously the #1 sport in the Olympics. We had 17 million people watch at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday last July and watch Simone Biles win the all-around. So there's an audience that tunes in and loves women's gymnastics, and so I applaud you for starting this women's gymnastics league. It's hard for, you call this legacy media, but legacy media, it's hard because we're stuck between Peacock and broadcast. And where does a new startup go? I would not say Peacock's the best. Most people that are showing up on Peacock have some intent on what they want to watch. They're not stumbling into a new sport. Now, maybe during the Olympics or coming right out of the Olympics, you might have a gymnastics fan still there. On the broadcast side, I mean, what's happening again is the bar to be on broadcast within the sports hours is ever increasing with the ratings going up. And it's been difficult for us, at least at NBC, and it may be different in different places, to invest in startup leagues because you give them exposure, and then once the contract's up, they go to the highest bidder. And it's been hard for us to say, well, the other way to get upside in that is to get equity in something, but that requires, at least internally, a lot of other people to get involved, and you can only sort of ring that bell so many times. And and in some points, it's really hard to get money out of the company to invest or take equity because you have all sorts of liabilities that come along with that. So it's a tough spot for at least NBC to do around there. Now, I think your question also includes what are the ways you can monetize that asset? And certainly there is NIL, there is working with brands. Certainly women's sports is having a moment, and I shouldn't even say having a moment. I mean, it drives the entire Olympic business for us. And certainly WNBA is increasing in their exposure. The NWSL is having a moment too. And so there's something there that you could probably get with certain advertisers to back it and push this league forward. It's just harder on the media side for at least people like me at NBC.
From the property point of view, I can talk a little bit about this. I mean, if we put the TCS New York City Marathon on a subscription platform where you had to pay something to watch it, right? We would monetize it. People would pay. I'm not sure how many, but there's certainly a core group of people who love running who would pay to watch that. But the problem for us is, without being on broadcast, right? And we're with Channel 7 in New York and with ESPN, our sponsors would be very unhappy, right? We've got a huge set of sponsors from TCS to United Airlines, New Balance, MasterCard. Sponsorship's about 30% of our revenue. So we've got to make them happy, and the broad reach of broadcast is still the best way to get that exposure that exposes brands and things like that, while at the same time wanting to nibble where we can in the direct to consumer revenue that's out there for a lot of sports, and so just like Rick's talking about having Peacock and broadcast at the same time, a lot of properties want whether it's rights fees or exposure that comes from broadcast while still trying to get some of the direct to consumer revenue that's out there from the most kind of hardcore fans of your sport. So it comes down to kind of having a mix of the two, I think, as you're building up your property.
Thank you. Very good question.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. It's been really interesting. Question is, what's a failure or setback that you experienced, and what did that teach you?
You want to start?
Sure, failure and setback. I mean, I can talk a little bit about one. I mean, when I left NBC Sports in 2019, working with Rick, and decided to go try my hand in the startup world, launched a little startup called Persona, which was a platform that was really about helping people create interview content for with their kids and their parents and grandparents and things like that. And it was a great experience, What I learned through that is a couple things. Number one, it can be a great idea isn't always a great business, right? You can have an idea that people love and they want to do it, and everybody wants to have interviews with their kids and their grandparents. People love it, but turning that into a business was a lot harder, right? Finding a way to productize that and make that work as a business was harder. So I learned that. And I think that's something I've taken with me since then, because I look at a lot of things that, people are pitching us all the time. Hey, why don't you do this or do that? And I can look at something and say, well, that's a cool idea. I think people would want to do that. And maybe as a nonprofit, we can justify it because maybe it really adds to the components of our mission that matter to us. But you've got to have a way to rationalize it financially at the end of the day. So not every great idea is a great business. And I think that's the thing I really learned from that.
Yeah, I would just say career-wise, I moved over to Peacock in 2000, I guess it was 2018, 2019. I think I was the first employee at Peacock, or at least one of the first employees. And, I got in there, and there was a leader at the time, and that leader left, and I thought, hey, I want to run Peacock. This is going to be great. I'm doing, revenue, I'm doing programming, I'm doing product, I'm doing a bunch of different things. And instead, they had hired someone from the outside the company, and I was sort of just, just down in the dumps from that. And I'm like, well, what's my career going to be at NBC? And I could have just I guess, been down in my sorrows and kicked the dirt and whatever else. But instead, I just said, I'm going to work. I still love it here, et cetera, et cetera. And you kind of fast forward, then an opportunity comes up in sports programming. I moved back to NBC Sports, but bring along with it Peacock Sports Programming. And long and behold, the boss of Pete Pavakwa, who went off to be the Notre Dame athletic director, leaves 6 months after I come in to run programming, and sure enough, I'm able to take over NBC Sports. So it's a little bit just like keeping your personality up, making sure that you're optimist, even when things don't necessarily go your way, and keep pushing through things. And I think I could have taken it down a different path of being like, I'm done at NBC, I didn't get the job, I'm out of here. And instead, sure enough, I probably end up in a better job.
Great question.
So that's it for questions. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate everything you've given us.
Thanks, guys.
Fantastic panel.
Just a quick announcement again. My God, wow. Across the board, phenomenal. Andrew, Rick, Rob, what a night. So much learnings. To everybody in the audience, thank you so much for coming. Encourage you to go and grab another drink at the bar, hang out, network. And that's a wrap. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.